Have you ever wondered what might happen if a hardworking ranch widow discovered a wealthy stranger injured on her doorstep and then was forced to marry him by an old frontier law? That's exactly the heart-stopping moment we're diving into. Our heroine finds herself facing not just the threat of scandal, but the danger of powerful enemies who want the stranger gone for good, with a homestead to protect and her reputation on the line. She makes a bold choice that changes everything. Curious about how this gritty, unexpected partnership unfolds and whether two strangers can turn a marriage of convenience into a bond strong enough to defy the storm. You're in for a dramatic, heartfelt journey filled with secrets, loyalty, and the promise of a second chance. Make sure to subscribe to our channel right now to stay updated on every twist and turn in this frontier saga. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single chapter of this extraordinary story. Lily Connolly woke to the shrieking wind, rattling the shutters, a sure sign of the blizzard rolling in across the Montana foothills. Even inside her modest log cabin, she felt the chill creeping through every gap. Winter had never felt so ruthless since her husband Samuel passed on 2 years ago. Out here 5 miles from the nearest neighbor, survival depended on constant vigilance, mending fences, stockpiling food, and chopping enough firewood to outlast any blizzard. Lily had been up since dawn, hauling logs to the porch, carefully storing hay for her 2 cows, and triple-checking every window latch. The howling wind warned her that nature wouldn't give her any mercy. Her daily chores complete, Lily lingered on the porch just long enough to watch the sky darken with the first swirls of snow. She pressed a hand to the pendant under her collar. Samuel's old wedding band carried on a simple chain. It had become both a shield and an ever-present reminder. She refused to abandon Connolly Homestead, though everyone insisted it was too much for one woman alone. Even the well-meaning neighbors offered to buy her out or worse, find her another husband. But Lily remained steadfast. She and Samuel had built this place with their own hands, working sunrise to sunset so they could run a small herd of cattle and grow enough feed for winter. Even without him, she vowed never to let it go. By late afternoon, the storm advanced and the temperature dropped like a stone. Lily closed the shutters and pulled extra blankets out of storage, worried about how long the blizzard might last. If the snow piled up too high, she wouldn't be able to leave the cabin for days. She'd lived through one especially brutal winter, the winter that took Samuel's life, and she still remembered the claustrophobic sense of isolation. The memory made her heart heavy, but she pushed aside her grief, reminding herself she was prepared. She had enough flour-dried beans and salted venison to last for weeks. Just as she was about to latch the front door for the evening, a strange thump against the porch startled her. The wind made it hard to tell if it was just a wayward tree branch, but the sound came again, heavier than before. Alarmed, Lily grabbed her shotgun from the mantel. Out here, wild animals prowled in storms looking for shelter. She braced herself for perhaps a coyote or wolf that had wandered too close. But when she cracked open the door, the sight nearly stole her breath. A man lay sprawled, face down on her porch, coated in a dusting of snow. Her first thought was that he was already dead. His coat looked expensive, dark wool with silver buttons, and a matching hat had tumbled off, rolling beside him. When Lily crouched down, she saw blood staining his shoulder, and he let out a faint, ragged moan. She quickly realized leaving him there meant sure death. The storm was gathering power by the minute. Frowning, she set aside the shotgun and grabbed the man beneath his arms, trying to drag him inside. He was heavier than he looked, and Lily's boots slipped on the snow-slick boards, nearly sending both of them tumbling. Still, she persisted, cursing the wind and the unknown man's bad luck. With a final heave, she got him across the threshold, slamming the door against the howling gale. Inside, the cabin's small fireplace offered warmth, and Lily wasted no time kicking aside rugs to clear a path for the stranger. Straining, she managed to pull him near the hearth. His breathing came in shallow gasps, and a quick look revealed a nasty bullet wound in his left shoulder. The blood on his coat had started to freeze, giving everything a stiff, ghastly sheen. Lily's nursing experience was limited to simple ranch injuries, but she'd treated Samuel's scrapes and once even stitched a neighbor's gash after a fence accident. She prayed it would be enough. She tore at the stranger's coat, cutting away the material around the wound. Underneath, his shirt was soaked in blood, and the skin beneath looked dangerously pale. She had no idea who might have shot him or why, but out here in the frontier, violence often traveled on the same winds as fortune. Beneath the layers, she found a worn leather satchel strapped across his torso, opening it briefly to see if it contained any identification. She glimpsed an embossed metal flask and a thick ledger, but no name. She decided to deal with that later. His life was more important than his belongings. rushing to gather her meager supplies. Lily grabbed clean cloth, a thread and needle, and the whiskey bottle she kept for cold nights. With trembling hands, she poured the whiskey onto the cloth to sterilize it as best she could, then began cleaning the wound. The man stirred, eyes flickering open for barely a second. They were a sharp, stormy blue, startling against his gray-tinged skin. Lily shushed him and continued her work. She pressed a folded rag against the bleeding, and when it slowed, used the whiskey-soaked needle to stitch the wound closed. His eyelids fluttered, and he let out a ragged moan. It must have been agony, but the cold combined with blood loss likely dulled the worst of it. Exhausted, Lily sat back on her heels. The cabin felt suddenly smaller, filled with the rasping sound of his breathing and the crackle of the fireplace. She couldn't help noticing his handsome features under the dirt and stubble, strong jaw hair the color of chestnut, and an angular face that hinted at a life spent with finer things than a snowbound ranch. Yet here he lay half dead in a stranger's house. Her gaze flicked to the window. If anyone found out she was sheltering an unknown man, there would be whispers for sure, more than whispers under the old territorial statutes. A single woman with a man in her house overnight was a serious matter. Some backward folks still insisted such a situation meant she had to marry him or leave the territory in disgrace. The law was rarely enforced, but the threat loomed as a relic of a time when the frontier was raw and savage. It wasn't so long ago that reputations were everything, and neighbors might wield the code to meddle in personal affairs. Shaking her head, Lily told herself it was too early to worry about that. First, she needed to keep him alive. She layered blankets over him, poured water into a kettle for tea, and tried to coax a bit of liquid past his lips. His feverish brow furrowed, and he swallowed weakly before slipping back into unconsciousness. Snow battered the windows, sealing them in. Lily's heart thudded in her chest, uncertain about what storm would rage louder: nature's fury outside, or the gossip destined to circle once folks realized who she harbored inside her home. The next 2 days blurred into a cycle of vigil and nursing. The blizzard raged, piling drifts of snow against the cabin walls and burying Lily's fencing. She barely slept, checking the man's temperature every few hours, forcing small sips of broth down his throat and tending to the wounded shoulder. Several times she feared infection would set in, or that he'd slip away from fever dreams that made him mutter incoherently. She caught fragments of possible names: Vickers, Gallagher, Bethany, and once he mumbled something about lost accounts, but she couldn't make sense of it. By the third evening, the storm subsided, revealing a harsh white landscape outside her window. Lily peered out to see if any neighbor might be coming by, but all she saw was endless snow. The official track to her place was buried. It would be days before anyone could manage a visit, especially with the temperature plummeting at night. She tried to convince herself that was a good thing. No sudden confrontations about an unknown man under her roof. Exhausted, Lily dozed in the chair beside him, waking with a start when he rasped her name. Except, of course, he didn't actually know her name. Still delirious, he muttered. "Help me, please," his voice, a hollow echo in the quiet cabin. She shifted closer, pressing a hand to his forehead. The fever felt less intense than before. "It's all right," she murmured, mostly to soothe him as she might a spooked horse. "You're safe here." His eyes opened a sliver, revealing a flash of that stormy blue. For the first time, he seemed aware of his surroundings. "Where?" His voice cracked. "You're at my homestead," Lily said gently, lifting his head so he could sip some water. "I found you nearly frozen on my porch during the blizzard. You were shot." He swallowed, grimacing as if the simple act hurt. After a few attempts, he managed. "You saved me, I suppose so," Lily replied, feeling an odd twinge of defensiveness. "It was either that or watch you die on my porch. Didn't strike me as the neighborly thing to do." He managed a faint, humorless chuckle that turned into a cough. You have no idea." About what she pressed, but he shook his head, wincing from the motion. Too weak to continue, he fell back into a restless sleep, leaving Lily with more questions than answers. She eyed the leather satchel he'd carried, wondering if it held the truth about why someone might shoot him. The bank ledger, she glimpsed the crisp sheets with figures that looked suspiciously large. Who exactly was this man, and how had he ended up half dead on a remote ranch in the middle of a blizzard? For now, she let it be. Taking a deep breath, Lily busied herself by boiling more water and preparing the cabin for nightfall. She topped off the wood pile, double-checked the shutters, and then settled into her rocking chair, shotgun within arm's reach. The flickering fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the wounded stranger's shallow breaths were the only sounds. Lily didn't know his name or his story, But she knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be quite the same after this storm cleared. When dawn broke, Lily's unexpected house guest struggled into a sitting position, ignoring her protests that he should remain as still. "I need to leave," he said, voice rough as gravel. His complexion was ashen, hair matted from sweat and fever, but a flash of determination lit his eyes. "You're in no shape for traveling," Lily countered, crossing her arms. "We just got 3 feet of snow. Even if you could walk, you'd freeze before you got a mile." He opened his mouth to argue, then frowned. "Who are you, anyway?" Her lips tightened, Lily Connolly. "And this is my ranch. That's all you need to know right now." She considered telling him more, but her instincts told her to be cautious, Gavin. Loughton, he finally offered, exhaling through clenched teeth as he tried to adjust his wounded shoulder. The name tugged at Lily's memory. An article she'd read about the wealthy Loughton family, famous for controlling several major banks and investing in ambitious railroad expansions. The story had painted Gavin as a cunning businessman, though she couldn't recall the details. "Loughton," she repeated with a note of recognition. His gaze sharpened. "Does that scare you?" Lily bristled. "Should it? I'm just a ranch widow living off the land, unless you plan to foreclose on me right here and now. I'm not sure how your name is supposed to matter." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair point." He looked around the small cabin. The sturdy log walls, the carefully kept furniture, the modest table set for one. "You're alone out here," she nodded. "Been that way for 2 years since my husband passed." Something flickered in Gavin's expression. Maybe sympathy, maybe regret. Then he closed his eyes for a moment, as if too exhausted to maintain the conversation. Lily took the opportunity to check his bandages, applying a fresh strip of cloth with antiseptic salve. He winced but didn't protest, and a soft knock made them both freeze. Outside, muffled voices rose, carrying through the chilly morning air. Lily's heart jumped to her throat. Whoever had come calling was earlier than any neighbor typically arrived. Keeping her voice low, she told Gavin, "Stay down, keep quiet." She carefully opened the door a crack to see 2 men on horseback. Their hats and coats were dusty, and they looked like trouble. One had a scar across his jaw, the other a hawk-like glare. Lily eased the door open just enough to step onto the porch, pulling it shut behind her to conceal Gavin from view. "Mornin'," she said calmly, though her pulse thudded. "Something I can help you with." The scarred man tilted his head toward the house. "We're looking for someone, Heard. He might have been riding through this territory." "Goes by Gavin Loughton." Lily forced a laugh that sounded surprisingly steady. "Ain't seen anyone but the snow and my own reflection these past few days. Storm had me hold up." The hawk-eyed rider's lips curved in a sneer. "You alone out here, ma'am." She squared her shoulders. "My late husband built this place sturdy. I manage fine." She hoped that small lie would keep them from forcing entry. "You fellas can check around the barns if you like. Don't see how a man on horseback could vanish in these drifts without me noticing." Scarjaw studied her face, then nodded to his partner. "We'll have a quick look." Lily's stomach clenched as she watched them ride toward her barn rifles at the ready. She had to keep them from discovering Gavin, or God knew what might happen next. Lily waited on the porch, forcing her posture to remain relaxed, though her heart hammered painfully. The 2 men circled her barn, opening the creaky door to peer inside. She silently cursed herself for not hiding, Gavin's horse assuming he had one, though she'd seen no sign of it. Perhaps it had bolted when he collapsed. If the men discovered a strange horse in her stable, the jig would be up. After a few minutes, they returned. Scarjaw seemed irritated. "No horse, no tracks. Didn't see fresh footprints either." "Looks like you're telling the truth, ma'am?" "Of course," Lily said in her calmest tone. "Now that's all I've got chores to do before the next storm blows in." Hawkeye spat onto the snow, then tipped his hat with an edge of disrespect. "We'll be moving on. But if you happen upon this Loughton fella, best let us know. There's a handsome reward for information leading to his safe return." A reward, Lily wondered, not missing the smug emphasis on safe return. This clearly wasn't about friendly rescue. She forced a neutral nod, watching them ride off. Once their silhouettes vanished over the snowy horizon, she released a shaky breath. Her nails had dug crescents into her palms. Inside, she found Gavin struggling to stand. He was halfway off the cot, leaning against the table for support, face contorted in pain. "They're gone," she said bluntly, slipping a shoulder under him to guide him back to the makeshift bed. "Almost found you, though." He sank down, wincing. "They want me alive, so they'll try every ranch until they track me down." Care to tell me why? Lily pressed, lowering herself to a stool. I won't harbor a man under false pretenses if it's going to bring a posse banging on my door every other day. Gavin's gaze moved to the satchel near the fireplace, and Lily realized he was debating how much to reveal. Finally, he exhaled. I own a large portion of the Loughton banking enterprise. We finance land deals, ranch expansions, railway lines, everything. My father built the company from nothing, taught me to keep the business humane. But after his passing, certain associates started pushing us in a darker direction. The result, predatory loans, forced foreclosures, land grabs. I started investigating to see how extensive the corruption was. And it's worse than I feared. Gavin gestured weakly at the satchel. That ledger you saw details a lot of these illicit operations, including expansions that encroach in on smaller ranches. Some people stand to lose fortunes if I expose them or if I undo those deals. I suspect that's why someone tried to kill me. Lily studied him in silence. If his story was true, he wasn't just a random banker. He was a whistleblower holding a ledger that could help half the ranchers in Montana keep their land. But the flip side was that Gavin Loughton had likely profited, at least indirectly, from these deals before trying to put a stop to them. The moral lines seemed blurry, but one thing was clear. His life was in danger. At least you know who's behind that bullet, Lily said. What I want to know is how I'm supposed to handle it if they come back. We might have old-fashioned laws in this territory, but I'm no fool. Hiding you could ruin me. I never asked you to hide me, Gavin replied, though his voice was tinged with guilt. I only know that if I leave now, I'll be dead before I reach the next settlement. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Let's focus on your recovery. Meanwhile, I'll figure out what to do if a bigger search party arrives. He lay back, eyes closing, but not before a soft, "Thank you," escaped his lips. Lily said nothing, instead stirring the fire and adding an extra log. She wished she had answers for Gavin for herself, but the only clear truth was that the old frontier law threatened her far more than she'd let on. If the local officials discovered Gavin under her roof, she might be forced to marry him or lose her homestead. And that ironically could destroy the life she and Samuel had built far more effectively than any bullet. The whispers began, as they inevitably do in a small frontier community, the moment the storm lifted enough for Lily's neighbor to bring supplies from town. Clem Jameson, who ran the local general store, arrived with his daughter Jenny in a mule-drawn sleigh piled high with flour sacks, lamp oil, and salt. Lily had hoped to keep Gavin hidden in the bedroom, but he was too weak to move without assistance. And besides, it wouldn't be long before rumors circulated about an injured man on her property. Clem seemed genuinely concerned for Lily's well-being. Heard there was a pair of rough-looking strangers asking about you on the main road, he said, unloading supplies by her door. Wanted to be sure you're all right, I managed, Lily replied carefully. She waited for Clem to press further, but his good nature usually kept him from prying. Jenny, however, peered past Lily into the cabin and spotted Gavin's jacket draped over a chair. The girl's eyes widened, but she said nothing, instead whispering to her father. Less than an hour after Clem departed, Lily noticed another visitor approaching Albert Reed, who acted as the territory's registrar and the unofficial enforcer of certain archaic moral codes. Lily's heart sank when she saw the stern set of his jaw. If he confirmed that Gavin was inside the law, would be invoked. Lily forced herself to remain calm as he dismounted. Good day, Miss Connolly, he said, tipping his hat with just enough politeness to be strained. Mind if I come in? She blocked the entrance with her body. I'm a bit busy. Mr. Reed wasn't expecting visitors. He cleared his throat. I've heard rumors. A man is residing in your cabin. One who's not kin and not your husband. Surely you know how that appears. Lily bit the inside of her cheek. Mr. Reed, I appreciate your concern, but it's not your place to come sniffing around. A fellow I know was caught in the blizzard. I gave him a shelter. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. He lifted a bushy brow. You're aware of the old statute. If an unmarried woman harbors a man under her roof for more than a night, the territory requires them to be married. Or else exile, I'm aware, Lily finished bluntly. But that law's hardly enforced these days. Reed puffed out his chest. In these uncertain times, moral guidelines protect communities. Folks around here respect you, Lily. Don't risk your reputation by defying the law. If he's still here, the council will insist on immediate marriage unless he leaves. Lily's temper flared. Forcing marriage to preserve a so-called reputation is ridiculous. She snapped, though fear coiled in her gut. Without her property, she had nowhere to go, and giving it up would betray Samuel's memory. Reed exhaled a long breath. I'll be back to check. Might want to see if your visitor can move on once he's healed. If not, the council's next step is out of my hands. Lily didn't respond. She stayed silent, jaw clenched until Albert Reed mounted his horse and rode off. She glanced over her shoulder to see Gavin standing unsteadily in the doorframe, pain etched across his face. He'd heard enough to understand her predicament. Without a word, Lily slammed the door as if trying to block out the law, the gossip and the looming ultimatum. But no matter how hard she tried, they'd seep through the cracks just like the winter cold. That evening, Gavin asked her to sit with him at the wooden table. A single lantern illuminated the cabin, flickering shadows dancing against the logs. Outside, the night sky glimmered with stars, but Lily felt no peace. The old law hovered over them like a storm cloud. I can't let you lose your land, Gavin said. He spoke haltingly, still battling fatigue but determined. You've saved my life. I won't repay that by forcing you off your homestead. She fiddled with a chipped mug, her voice subdued. It's not up to you, though, is it? This territory's law is a relic, but folks around here have a fierce sense of the tradition. If certain men on the council decide to enforce it, we'll have no choice. We do have a choice, Gavin ventured. We could. His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Lily swallowed hard. We could marry you a banker with ties back east, and me a ranch widow who's determined never to sell. That's a transaction, not a union. A wry smile curved his lips. I'm well versed in transactions. Lily, doesn't mean I see people as commodities, especially not you. This wouldn't be a real marriage, but a safeguard. Once I've exposed the corruption and sorted out the business, you could have an annulment if you like, but it would protect you from the council until then. She studied him, searching his face for a hint of manipulation. Instead, she saw earnest gratitude mingled with guilt over the trouble his presence had caused. If we do that, she said slowly, word will travel. My neighbors will believe I've remarried for convenience. Some might applaud me. Others will judge. I know, Gavin admitted. And if we can confirm who orchestrated the attempt on my life, I can leave faster, freeing you of any long-term entanglements. Lily took a long time before answering. She recalled nights huddled by the fire alone after Samuel died, praying for the strength to keep going. She recalled how often people urged her to let the place go to accept help in the form of a suitor or a sale. But what Gavin offered was a partnership of necessity, not a romance. Let's be clear. I'm only considering this to protect the homestead, she said firmly, and to give you time to sort out the ledger. If it becomes clear we're both at risk, I'll do what's needed to keep us safe. That's it. His mouth formed a tired but genuine smile. Understood. They fell into thoughtful silence. Lily could practically feel the weight of her husband's ring pressing at her collarbone. She was no longer the naive bride of years ago, trusting in the future's endless possibilities. Now she was a survivor, carving out a life on the edge of the wilderness. If this marriage of convenience was her only hope to avoid exile and keep Samuel's dream alive, perhaps it was a lesser evil than turning tail and running. All right, she said at last, voice steady. We'll tell Reed and the council we're getting married, but understand, I want to keep this strictly business. The moment we can, we'll unravel it. Gavin nodded, relief visible in the slight sag of his shoulders. Strictly business. He echoed, though the flicker in his gaze hinted at something more complicated. Lily chose to ignore that. For the sake of her homestead and the man she'd saved, she would face the territory's outdated law come what may. Rumors flew faster than a prairie fire in high wind, so by the time Lily and Gavin made it into town for the formalities, half the population was already crowding around the modest church. The territory's old regulation required a public acknowledgement of the union, with at least 2 council members present to witness. It felt surreal to Lily stepping out of her borrowed wagon beside a man she barely knew, while acquaintances and strangers alike craned their necks to gawk. Gavin, still pale from his injuries, managed a regal bearing that belied his exhaustion. He wore a simple suit purchased from Clem's store, a significant downgrade from the tailored attire he might have worn back east. Even so, he carried himself with calm confidence, his gaze scanning the crowd for hidden dangers. Lily felt a mixture of nerves and defiance. She wore a practical navy dress, no frills, and pinned her hair back in a severe bun, not wanting anyone to mistake this for a real wedding in the romantic sense. The ceremony itself lasted only minutes, officiated by the Reverend, who seemed uneasy about the circumstances. We gather here, he began, though his voice trembled with the tension in the room. The 2 council members, including Albert Reed, looked on with stern faces as if ensuring no rule went unmet. Lily spotted a few sympathetic neighbors like Clem and his daughter Jenny, or old Mrs. Anders, who had lost her farm years ago to shady financiers. These folks offered small smiles, but behind them gossipers buzzed, eyes bright with speculation. When the time came to exchange vows, Lily stiffened at the prompt for rings. She had nothing to offer except the ring on the chain around her neck, which belonged to Samuel. She gripped it through her blouse, heart pounding. Gavin, sensing her distress, quietly shook his head and produced a simple silver band, likely borrowed or purchased that very morning. Lily hesitated, then slipped it onto her finger. Her gaze flicked to the watchers, half expecting someone to shout that it was a sham, but no one did. With a final pronouncement, the Reverend declared them husband and wife, and a smattering of applause broke out, some polite, some uncertain. Lily nodded stiffly, ignoring the well-wishers who crowded forward. She felt numb, as though the entire process had happened to someone else. In the swirl of murmurs, Gavin gently touched her elbow. Ready to leave, yes, she breathed. They made their way outside, finding the main street brimming with townsfolk. Albert Reed cleared his throat, stepping forward with his ledger. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Loughton, he said formally. We trust this resolves any legal concerns. Lily mustered a thin smile. It does. Reed looked unconvinced, but scribbled a note in his ledger anyway. You'll both have to sign, then I'll file it in the county records. Your marriage is recognized by law. She and Gavin each scratched their signatures. Lily almost faltered at writing Lily Connolly Loughton, but forced her pen to complete the final swirl of the letter. Just like that, she was legally a different person, for better or worse. Onlookers parted to let them pass, some whispering behind gloved hands. Lily's cheeks burned under the scrutiny, but Gavin stayed by her side, a gentle pressure at the small of her back, guiding her forward. When they reached the wagon, he helped her up before climbing in. She flicked the reins, and the horses lurched forward. Only when they'd left the gossip-hungry crowd behind did Gavin speak. You did the right thing, Lily, I promise, she exhaled shakily. I hope you're right, Gavin, because I just took on a name that might cost me everything. If you don't deliver on those promises to fix whatever's broken in your bank. He nodded somberly, eyes fixed on the snowy horizon. I will. One way or another, I will. Word of the new marriage spread beyond town, reaching the outlying ranches and small holdings. Some neighbors arrived at Lily's homestead a day later to offer congratulations or to satisfy curiosity. Among them was Mary Anders, whose father lost his place to foreclosure the previous spring. Mary's smile was brittle. If you can get your husband to show mercy on the likes of us, we'd thank you from the bottom of our hearts. The young woman's plea reminded Lily why she'd agreed to this arrangement. Gavin, standing beside Lily on the porch, assured Mary that changes were coming. I've discovered irregularities in how certain loans were issued and collected. He said gently, we intend to make it right, that we was important. Lily realized. Though their marriage had started as a forced legal measure, they were forging a joint purpose, exposing corruption, restoring fairness, and protecting families who worked the land. Whenever Lily began to doubt the decision, she recalled the bullet wound on Gavin's shoulder and the men who had come sniffing around for him. This was bigger than local gossip. A powerful entity wanted Gavin's silence. In private moments, Lily showed him the letters she'd received from local ranchers panicking over ballooning debts and sudden demands for full payment. Gavin recognized the pattern of unscrupulous deals. He pored over the ledger, scribbling notes in the margins, cross-referencing each loan with the names of bankers or investors who might be complicit. I can't do this alone, he admitted one night, frustration coloring his voice. There are half a dozen deals here that bear the same signature, Barnes or Bartholomew, but the writing looks identical. Could be an alias. Then there are references to farmland acquisitions signed by someone named Donovan. Lily crouched beside him, scanning the ledger. Might be that these are all the same person. If you follow the property titles, does it loop back to one entity? Gavin's eyebrows rose. Yes. Look here. Every final deed is purchased under the name Redwood Holdings. That's a shell corporation if I've ever seen one. So Redwood Holdings is swallowing ranches and farmland left and right, Lily muttered. No wonder your father's original, more generous policies got tossed aside. Someone stands to make a fortune. He tapped a pen against the page. But who's behind Redwood Holdings? Their conversation was cut short by a knock. Albert Reed again, this time not alone. He had two other council members in tow, standing stiffly on Lily's porch. The men removed their hats and approached the threshold, scanning the cabin, as though searching for evidence. Mr. Loughton. Mr. and Mrs. Loughton. Reed began stumbling over the new name. "We'd like a word." Lily stepped aside to let them in. The council trio wasted no time expressing their concerns. Some folks claimed the marriage was a sham. Others pointed out that Gavin was still in no condition to manage a ranch. The men also insisted the newlyweds appear at the upcoming council meeting to confirm their union was legitimate. Glancing at Gavin, Lily saw a flicker of anger pass through him, but he kept his composure. "We'll attend," he said mildly, "and we'll also be bringing a list of demands to address certain improper banking practices." That last statement caused a ripple among the council members. They cast uneasy looks at each other. Lily guessed that at least one of them might have taken advantage of Redwood Holdings' buyouts. The tension in the small cabin was palpable, but she held her head high, forcing herself to appear every inch the confident wife of a banker, ready to challenge the status quo. The days leading up to the council meeting were a race against time. Lily and Gavin worked side by side, he in the cabin, poring over records, and she in the fields, ensuring her homestead ran smoothly, while also checking on neighbors who whispered that Redwood Holdings might send men to intimidate them into selling. A sense of unity grew around the Connolly homestead, with ranchers sharing stories of wrongful foreclosures and manipulated contracts. More than once, Lily caught Gavin gazing at her with admiration, as if surprised by how naturally she rallied the community. When the appointed day arrived, half the valley seemed to converge on the makeshift council hall, a converted grain warehouse in town. Lily and Gavin rode in on a borrowed buckboard wearing determined expressions. She felt a quiver of nerves under the stares and hushed comments, but Gavin's presence steadied her. Their once forced wedding had turned into something else, a genuine bond forged by shared purpose and mutual respect. Inside, wooden benches lined the space, and the council members sat at a long table led by Albert Reed. The assembly was larger than usual, including bankers, ranchers, and even a few traveling businessmen. Whispers indicated that some powerful figures from outside the valley had also arrived, likely Redwood Holdings representatives. Reed cleared his throat. "We're here to settle questions about the recent marriage between Lily Connolly and Gavin Loughton, and also to address allegations of improper banking practices." His voice echoed in the warehouse's rafters. Several ranchers spoke up, recounting how Redwood Holdings or similar companies had coerced them into selling through balloon payments or default threats. Then Lily took the floor, explaining how she'd found Gavin wounded, how she'd nursed him, and how the old territorial law had forced them into marriage to prevent her exile. The crowd stirred with sympathy or shock depending on whether they'd known the extent of that outdated regulation. Finally, Gavin presented the ledger. He pointed out the falsified signatures, the repeated pattern of Redwood Holdings acquiring titles at suspiciously low prices, and the widespread involvement of local enforcers who pressured families. "I discovered this corruption," he said, voice strong despite the last vestiges of pain from his wound. "And someone tried to kill me for it." A murmur swept through the assembled crowd, and one of the out-of-towners, a well-dressed man with a gold-tipped cane, rose to challenge him. "This is a private business matter, not something to be dragged before a county council." Gavin set his jaw. It ceased being private the moment Redwood Holdings and its agents used illegal tactics to rob honest ranchers. "I have enough proof here to warrant a federal investigation." Seeing their momentum, Lily added, "We also have testimonies from local families. If Redwood Holdings or any of its shell companies think they can hide behind complicated paperwork, they're mistaken." Reed looked flustered, but finally banged a makeshift gavel to restore order. He called on the banker from the nearest large town, who confirmed the authenticity of the records Gavin had. The tension peaked when the Redwood Holdings representative attempted to walk out only to find his path blocked by furious ranchers. A hush fell as local law enforcement stepped forward, ready to detain anyone fleeing the hearing. In the end, the council unanimously condemned the predatory practices. They promised to reevaluate every foreclosure with Gavin, pledging to use his family's resources to set fair terms. Lily breathed a sigh of relief as neighbors embraced one another, many on the brink of tears over what might be restored to them. Yet the moment was also personal triumph. She felt Gavin's hand slide into hers, and in front of the entire valley, they shared a smile that spoke volumes. While their union began out of desperation, they had discovered a genuine partnership that honored both his father's legacy and her late husband's dream for the land. She thought back to the night she found Gavin collapsed on her porch, how easily she could have barred the door. Instead, she had pulled him inside. Now, as the crowd spilled out of the warehouse, Lily caught sight of the wide-open Montana sky. Memories of Samuel drifted through her thoughts, blending with the new life she was forging. with Gavin. Tomorrow might bring fresh challenges, repairing fences, settling accounts, or fending off any lingering threats from Redwood Holdings remnants. But as she felt the silver wedding band on her finger and recalled Gavin's promise to do right by this valley, she believed they would face it all together. Their alliance was no longer merely a legal shield. It was a testament to hope, trust, and the power of two souls determined to preserve what truly mattered. Looking back, I'm struck by how courage and kindness can reshape even the hardest circumstances. At first, the forced wedding seemed like the cruelest twist of fate, a desperate measure to protect her land. But every challenge they faced together, from standoffs with ruthless outlaws to rebuilding shattered trust in the community, revealed just how strong people can become when they stand side by side. Through all the struggles they discovered, a unity grounded in respect and hope, forming a genuine bond that not only saved the homestead, but gave both of them a fresh start. If anything in this story moved you, whether it was the unexpected union, the fiery determination to do good, or the belief that second chances truly exist, let's keep the conversation going. Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that celebrate the enduring spirit of love, courage, and community.